Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by AIO Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Welcome, everyone, to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 287, which is airing on August 24th. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by AIO Gear with, as always, our money-back guarantee. If you do not like the show, we will give you 100% back. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, based on my recent social media experience, I would say there's probably plenty of people with their hand out.
I don't know. We just got to live with it, man. Being in the public eye is it's just part of it at this point. We got an interesting show planned for you today. We got 5 really good questions in the Midwest Land Group segment. I want to take a little bit of time and talk about this after the AIO break, talk about this post that you made about fawn recruitment, because I think it started a lot of conversation that may or may not overlay with some of what the folks are seeing in different areas of EHD. I think it's a fascinating conversation because when I've had heavy EHD, the fawns actually lived. That's the only deers that made it through. So I want to make sure we leave a lot of time for that later in the show. But as we kick the show off to start, we're approaching the holiday weekend next week. We talked last week about needing rain bad. I checked my soybeans today. Man, those pods just need some moisture to push those beans out. They're loaded with pods, but need that. But let's answer some of the common questions, Don, as it relates to fall food plots and when we're doing it. We're right in that window where you talk about get it around rain, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I seen a rain coming now and I had fall plots to plant, I'd be doing it. But we need rain bad here. I mean, if we got 2 inches of rain in a day, you wouldn't even know it rained. That's how dry it is. And we had a couple of good ones there in July, 2 different back-to-back weekends. We had 2.2 inches one weekend and 2.7 the very next weekend. And I don't know that we've had any since. And so we're over a month. And same as you, Terry, my soybeans look fantastic. But for those pods to fill out, we need to get some moisture. I think the corn crop's done at this point. I don't think rain's going to help it much, but definitely help the soybeans, and it'll get those fall plots off to a good start.
When I looked out I didn't walk out in the cornfield today, but just driving by on the side-by-side, I did notice that the corn is starting to dry down a little bit. The green's starting to turn yellowish and brownish. So like you said, I think the corn's at basically the back end. Let's talk a little bit about fall plots. If people were kind of following our advice, they've already sprayed and they got their ground prepped and they're sitting there waiting for the right window. And pretty much that's the next couple weeks is when the sweet spot is to put all these fall plots out around rain, right?
Yeah, back when I had a real job, Labor Day weekend was when I always shot for getting my plots in. I had 3 days off typically, and that's when I would shoot for getting those fall plots planted. And either side of that, a week either side of Labor Day weekend is good. I'll stick with my opinion that a little bit later is better than a little bit earlier. You're too early, those plants get too mature and lose their palatability, and the deer aren't nearly as attracted to them. So if you get it planted a little bit late, when those plants come out of the ground, that's when the deer want to hit them the most anyway. So I would much rather be just a week late than a week early.
Well, we've talked about this a couple times. Just as a reminder for folks, go ahead and start calling your local seed, co-op, Southern States. Green Prairie has some if you don't know where else to get them. But if you haven't planted your fall plots yet, see if the farmer might have some leftover soybeans or anybody has leftover soybeans. And I'm telling you, if you want to put something in to really juice your fall plot up that you're throwing in, you can mix anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds an acre in with your fall plot of soybeans. It does not matter if they're Roundup ready or whatever it is, but those little bitty soybean plants, You talk about a magnet and taking the browse pressure off of your other products in the mix, it can be a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to plant fall plots this year, and we're going to get into that with one of the questions that we've got. But when I did, I would have some leftover soybeans from the spring from my planting there when I vacuumed out the G-Series drill, and usually it was half a bag to 3/4 of a bag or so, and I would always plant them in my fall plots, and definitely might even spread some with the drone when the drone shows up at my place, just depending on the timing and when he's there and what some of these crop fields look like. But would definitely like to get some out there because the deer just hammer them when they come up and they're in that 2-leaf stage. It's one of the few things they got that time of the year that's really that tender and palatable, and also high in nutrients like protein.
So 2 guys that most of their life is trying to sell different seed and seed products were telling you this is when it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what blend or what brand or what group number, whether they're Roundup ready or not. These things are going to die at the first frost. Whatever you can get, the cheapest you can get, now's the time that you can cut a little bit of corners and just get what you want, as long as it's got a decent germination to it.
Yeah, and I don't advocate planting just a straight soybean plot in the fall, because as soon as it frosts, you're going to lose it. But you can mix soybeans in with like your harvest salad, deadly dozen, whatever else you're planting, and that takes a little bit of pressure off the plants that are going to survive through the first frost. And a lot of those plants are going to survive all winter and come back in the spring. But that soybean is a great attraction to get the deer hitting the plot and take pressure off of the plants that you did plant.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the new movie that is coming out with the Winslow Brothers. I'm not going to be able to make it out to Iowa to the premiere. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to make it with your schedule or not. I know you were going to try to at one point, but what do you think about our buddy Gene and Barry getting this movie finally released, and for people to be able to kind of see their story, connecting the dots to my generation and younger to some of the pioneers in the industry?
Well, those guys are first class all the way, and I guarantee you this will be a first class film. It's going to actually air tomorrow, Saturday, the day before this podcast is released, and I was going to go, but my grandson Bowen's second birthday party is that day, so I'm going to take care of family obligations instead. But definitely look forward to seeing that once it's released.
Yeah, I can't put into words enough how special it is at the Shipshewana show or these other trade shows that now these younger generations of guys are starting to be able to connect the dots with guys like Gene and Barry or Bobby Worthington. It's I think there's a real gap in the industry for a lot of years where these younger guys didn't even know who these pioneers were, that they didn't make hunting famous or popular. They figured out how big bucks maneuvered and how to kill them. It wasn't about a entertainment show on a DVD or the Outdoor Channel that they were doing. These guys pioneered what big bucks are doing and how to hunt them. And that's a big difference.
Well, people got to remember, I'm an old guy in the industry today at 62 years old, but these guys are 20 years older than I am, so or close to it. So they're getting up there, and it's just I feel sorry for the young crowd that never knew these guys and have not got to know them. I think I've said before that the hunting industry lacks for some good role models, and these guys are absolutely role models. And it's just a shame that some of the people that are looked up to today have very low character, in my opinion, and Gene and Barry are the highest character. And the thing of it is, I know them good enough that I know things beyond the hunting world about these guys, and besides the things I joke about, but I'm talking character things that these guys do that they don't ever talk about. They'll talk about it one-on-one when they're visiting with a close friend, but they're not going to talk to the public about it. And Gene, for example, good Christian guy that does things with youth, especially young boys, taking groups of them camping, in the mountains, Montana, where he lived for a lot of years, and mentoring these kids on not mentoring them as a hunter, but just as young men, building character in these young kids. And I've never heard him talk about that in public. And he shared different things with me, and he's been a good friend over a number of years. Right here in my desk drawer, I wasn't even planning this, but I'm gonna pull this out and show it. This is a piece of petrified antler that one day, just out of the blue, I got a package in the mail from Gene Winsel. And I hadn't talked to him for a while, so I wasn't expecting anything. And so I opened up the package, and there was a little note from Gene with this piece of petrified deer antler that I think he said it's like 10,000 years old or some crazy number like that. But he said he just wanted me to have it, as a token of our friendship. And it's things like that the public doesn't see, but he'll make a person feel good one-on-one, and he'll do things without, tooting his own horn, and just respect the heck out of those guys.
Well, it's for those who have been to the Midwest Sportsman's Classic, our trade show up in Shipshewana, and seen these events that we put on. These guys are a hoot, but my job when I get there is to shoehorn in certain talking points within a time period. And man, that's a tough task. I will be honest with you. It's a tough task because they get on a roll and they're just so funny. It's like telling your grandpa to quit talking. And, but they have been so gracious to me and respectful and encouraging as we've done these events the last couple of years. So such an honor and blessing that I've gotten to know them, not at the level you have over the years, but special guys. I hope that, and maybe even by the time this weekend rolls around and this video's out where people can find it on different platforms, we'll share where you can go and watch this film documenting their life. I know all the AIO crew is out there. Joe wanted us both to go out there, but we just couldn't because of conflicts. Speaking of, let's go ahead and mention the Farm Progress show next week. Real World and Green Prairie will have a booth in the conservation tent, and you will be there, but I'm going to have to stay back home and take care of some family stuff. I'm not going to be able to make it. But pretty exciting show. I hear this show is fantastic, even for guys who aren't big farmers that just want to go and learn about equipment or different. I think it's a great learning experience for anybody wanting to get into food plotting or farming.
Well, I'd go every few years. I haven't been for a few years, but there is something. If you're interested in the outdoors, the homestead lifestyle or the farming lifestyle or just the rural lifestyle, there's something there that's going to interest you. It's not just big equipment. I mean, it's anything and everything that you would find on a farm and things that you would never think of. I remember last time I went, they were giving every big booth was giving out free stuff. And I had these 5-gallon buckets, with the different companies' logos on them. And I had both hands full, and the buckets were full of just free stuff. And anybody that's going to go, please stop by the booth and say hi. I'll be there with Angela, who'll be working the Green Prairie booth, and James Hayden, our sales manager, will be there in the Real World booth, and we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, we'll be in the conservation tent. Again, my apologies for not being able to be there. Wish I could, but yeah, stop by and see him. I was talking to our friends from Larson Farms YouTube channel. You remember Eric Weber, who came to the master class a couple years ago. He's a big hunter up in Minnesota. They're going to be down there. And he did say that the traffic at this show is like none other. So if you haven't been to this show, make sure you're taking that into consideration. So we were talking just about the show in general earlier, and he mentioned how bad the traffic was getting in there. So take that into consideration when you're going.
Yeah, it's a traffic jam in the country like you haven't never seen, no doubt about it.
But I think they even have like live demonstrations of tillage tools out in the field and everything. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of cool even to take kids and watch big equipment. If you're going to that, stop into the conservation booth and see Don. And then real quick before the AIO break, let's put a plug in for the men's retreat for the Solid Rock Chapel. If you don't mind, Don, let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we got a very, very special speaker this year. Our very own Terry Peer is going to be there. And the event, it's 2 days, really. It's Friday evening, September 12th. There will be a steak supper, and then Terry will give us a speech. And then the next morning, Saturday morning is basically a huge breakfast, all you can eat. And then we're going to do a live podcast there. So bring your questions. And guys, this is very informal. There'll be a campfire. Everybody just be sitting in lawn chairs around this campfire, and great time. I mean, every person there has got a heart of gold, and you'll find it very welcoming, and you'll fit right in. And you know, in the past, we've had people from, there was one year, I think the first year I was involved with putting it on, I think we had people from like 8 or 9 states. I mean, they came from as far away. There was a guy in Pennsylvania won my bow that year. I gave away my Matthews bow that I'd gotten the year before, but they came from Missouri and Iowa and Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and I don't remember where all. So there's a nice crowd. It's not huge. Very informal. You'll get a chance to talk to anybody you want, whether it's Terry or myself or any of the folks putting it on. It'll be a great time. So hope to see you there. I'm going to give you a phone number to call if you want to reserve a spot. It's 217-254, and you'll be talking to Curtis. And that steak supper, ribeyes on Friday night, and then, I don't know, bacon, eggs, and all the trimmings on Saturday morning. The cost is $35. You can camp right there at the site. There's people that bring tents or campers. Lake Shelbyville is right there. I mean, like walking distance right across the road. You can come early or stay late and go fishing on the lake. Local motels in Sullivan, Shelbyville, Mattoon. So hope to see you there.
I heard that Al Foster will also have a map of the lake and give everybody all of his secret spots where he fishes everywhere around that lake for anybody that comes in from out of state. I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard the rumor.
Well, I don't know if I can confirm that or not, but Al will be there. Him and Joey. You guys remember Joey from the Joey buck I shot a few years ago, and the shed antler hound. Those guys will be there, so you get to meet them and talk to them as well. And be a great time to talk deer hunting, fishing, whatever you want to talk about. There'll be somebody there that's got the same interest.
Yeah, my talk that I'm planning on doing is something I've never talked about before, and I will probably never talk about it again. This is going to be a one-time only deal, so hope you come and you're encouraged. Let's take a quick break and listen to the folks from AIO. Make sure you go back out to their YouTube channel. They released a really, really high-quality production video about 5 minutes long. It's maybe 6 minutes long, about the first 5 years in business. Talks about the people behind the brand. Make sure some of the video that's going to be playing in this new spot that we're about ready to hit play on is footage from that video. So make sure you go watch this. Don't fast forward. Make sure you're watching this video, and we'll be right back.
AIO Gear was forged by apex predators. Our 2 camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetails range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters, from our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. AIO Gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit AIO Gear and use code Chasing Giants for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
Okay, Don, you made a social media post this week, and I find it very, very interesting about how you said the fawn recruitment was extremely low this year and related it to predators actually in your video. And I just find it fascinating how the cycle has happened where it wasn't that long ago that you were actually turning foxes loose, I think, on your farm, letting it go and seeing just your observations change on a farm that, for the most part, you have dialed in when it comes to whitetail. But I find it fascinating that every single year there's always a new observation and a change as the environment changes as you try to manage it. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I was out doing some filming earlier in the week. I go out a lot of evenings with my video camera, and I'll sit on a field edge or or some place where I got a good observation point, and
Don't
I'm
say you
looking.
sit on top of a grain bin, because we get roasted for sitting on top of a grain bin.
Well, if you don't wear an ankle monitor, you're able to get off the porch and you can climb up on a grain bin, but some people are stuck on the porch because of that ankle monitor. But anyway, I'm trying to do a lot of glassing and videoing of velvet bucks. And the other evening I was out and I had 6 does come out into the soybeans, and there was not a fawn. Well, they didn't come out together, but the 6 total does came out and fed in this double crop soybean field, and there was not a single fawn with them. And I've been noticing basically all summer that there's darn few fawns on my farm, and I'm seeing does almost daily, but it's pretty rare that one of them's got a fawn with her. And the only thing I can attribute it to is predators, because I've got several coyote pictures on my cameras this summer, and the bobcats. The bobcats literally have wiped out my pheasant population. I mean, literally wiped them out. I can't remember the last time I seen a pheasant, and I once had more pheasants than the rest of the township put together. So it's crazy over the years, because I've been on this farm since birth. It was my grandparents' place. And I promise you, my grandpa never, ever dreamed that there'd be bobcats on this farm. He never seen a bobcat, never dreamed it even possible there'd be a bobcat. Turkeys, I got wild turkeys now for the last 3 years. They've been here in the spring, and now I'm even seeing some in the summer. Never happened before. Even deer. My grandpa would have never dreamed of seeing the deer that we got here today. But back in his day, there was a lot more small game, and it's just really interesting to see how the habitat has changed and the species that use it change. And one thing that really strikes me and has me just amazed at nature is that where did these species come from? I mean, where did that first bobcat come from? It came from a ways off. And then the other thing, even small game like gray squirrels, we never had a gray squirrel on this farm when I was a kid. Never. Not a single gray squirrel. It was unheard of. And now we've got plenty of gray squirrels. Where did the first gray squirrel come from? I mean, he had to come, where how my farm sits out in the middle of wide open prairie. How in the world did the first squirrel traverse miles and miles of wide open cornfields to end up at my place? Things like that just I find so interesting. I've sit in my tree stand. I've seen bobcats from my tree stand. I've watched mink. So just about every animal, every species of wildlife that lives in Illinois, I've had them walk by my tree stand. And that was not the case when I started. And my grandpa would have never dreamed some of the critters that are here today.
Well, I think when you really put it that way, it's like, okay, I can see these stories where you hear of a mountain lion ranging, miles and miles and miles, or a deer going miles, or bear or whatever. But you're right. When you start thinking about how did that squirrel get 6 miles from the nearest woodlot to the west, it's like, that's a long way for those little legs to get going. I mean, did he hitch a ride in the back of a grain wagon, or how?
And there had to be more than one for him to reproduce. So unless a pregnant female showed up and started having a litter. But I got kind of sidetracked there on the whole thing about the fawn recruitment this year. The only explanation I've got is the bobcats and coyotes, because there should have been plenty of fawns born. They're very susceptible to predation when they're young. Somebody made a comment on that post today that there's something about a doe would absolutely tear apart a bobcat if a bobcat was trying to get her fawn. Well, that's probably true, but these does, they leave their fawns. They don't stand by for that doe to stand there. She's attracting predators. They'll leave those fawns in the weeds or the brush or whatever and go about their business and come back a couple times a day to nurse them. So she's not there to protect those fawns most of the time. I mean, a fawn, it would be easy for a bobcat to catch a fawn. And one more story before
they're the best hunters ever too. I mean, it's...
Oh yeah, one more story while we're talking about strange wildlife ventures. One of the neatest things I ever seen while hunting, I was in a stand overlooking a small soybean plot several years ago actually. But I watched a mink chase a rabbit around that soybean plot for, I bet you, 10 minutes. And I never did see him catch it, but that mink was trying his best to catch that rabbit, and they were running through the beans back and forth, right and left. And it wasn't a real thick soybean stand. It'd been browsed pretty heavy, but that was just neat as could be to sit there and watch that mink, and never knew I was within 100 miles of him chasing that rabbit around.
I've never seen a mink in the wild. I've gotten a trail camera picture of him down by the river, but I've actually never seen one in person.
I've seen several from a stand. It's not something I see every year. Probably every, 3 or 4 years I'll see one from a stand.
All right. Well, before we go to the 360 Blinds Higgins Hot Seat segment, I want to put out a reminder to make sure everybody's watching the Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. It's where this podcast gets uploaded onto YouTube every week. We also have other content, including my dad's podcast, Chasing Assurance. If you haven't checked that out and you're looking for some encouragement from more of a devotional side, please check that out. It's getting a lot of really good feedback from the Christian churches, and we really, really appreciate the support on it. And hunt videos start this week. I saw a draft of Joe Bosing's early season hunt that's going to be airing here just in a few days. And then you got to see the first draft of the King David hunt. We got a lot of work to do to it yet, but you got to see a first draft of it this week.
That was I'm telling you, that's going to be a great, great video. We probably ought to save that one for our Thanksgiving Day release. We usually release a video on Thanksgiving Day. That is an absolutely fantastic video. It's like 3 different messages within that video, and I won't spoil the video, but I just seen the very rough draft. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, we're really excited about bringing you this. Don's grandson's hunt's going to be in there in September. We got the whole fall planned with hunt videos, so make sure you're subscribed and following with notifications on the Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. Now let's transition to the Higgins Hot Seat segment brought to us by 360 Blinds. And for those of you who love when Don gets on a political rant, you're going to love this question I got ready for him this week. I just know when Don is primed up ready for a political question. For those of you who don't like it, you might want to hit fast forward and not listen to this, but I think it's going to be quite comical. So my question is more of a pitch to you, Don, and that is, I really think we need to rebrand. Those watching on YouTube right now can see the logo of Chasing Giants on my hat. I really think we need to follow the pathway of Cracker Barrel and try to appeal to the masses instead of sticking with what we know and knowing the customer and knowing our audience. What do you think about this whole deal with Cracker Barrel, and why do these companies keep going back to woke when it repeatedly just burns them?
Well, obviously they feel strongly about their position and nuttiness. I promise you that none of them have Jesus in their heart. Not a single one of them woke freaks has Jesus in their heart. I don't get it. I mean, my wife and I had the discussion earlier today. I mean, we're done with Cracker Barrel, and how crazy is it that people do this? I don't know if Bud Light ever recovered. Can you imagine? Take Bud Light. Well, we look at Cracker Barrel too, but Bud Light, who's their main customer? Their main customer is probably blue-collar working people. And you think a couple of blue-collar working guys are going to go into their local watering hole after work and have a Bud Light after that fiasco? Why? Everybody in there would be making fun of them. No way. I mean, no way. And then Cracker Barrel. I mean, who does Cracker Barrel appeal to? When you go in and eat at Cracker Barrel, like a lot of times we used to go in after church on Sunday, and a vast majority of the people, you could tell they'd been to church. They were dressed up, and you could tell they'd been to church. I mean, do these people not even take into consideration who their customers are and how they're going to react? I mean, what an absolute freak show. I mean, you got to be absolutely nuts out of your freaking gourd to do something that stupid.
Well, it's people go to Cracker Barrel for country cooking.
Yeah.
That's the reason you go there. And they're trying to not appeal to the country southern. It just baffles me.
Well, and they started serving alcohol here, a couple of years ago? It's like they're trying to take this down-home southern country restaurant and turn it into a gay bar. That's what they're trying to do. They're a bunch of homos. It's just a freak show. It's not like the freaks even eat there anyway. I mean, how many freaks do you see eating? How many purple-haired freaks do you see eating at Cracker Barrel? I mean, they're catering to a group that doesn't even support them, while they alienate the people that do.
Well, I hope all of you all who did not fast forward through this segment are giggling a little bit. I thought it was time to use a Higgins Hot Seat for a fun little question to get Don fired up. But let's transition to the Midwest Land Group. Listener submitted questions. We'll be right back with the first question from a friend of ours in New York.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
Alrighty, our first question comes from Edward Miller from Lyons, New York. He says, on a previous podcast, you said you wish you had planted oaks in your cattle pasture instead of ash trees. You have also said that you like to separate your cover from your food. How come you plant mass-producing trees in your sanctuary? Can you clear my head on that? I'm a long-time listener, and I've come to the point where I can predict your answers most of the time, but this one has me scratching my head. I love this podcast and all you guys do. Well, Edward, there's always going to be food in your sanctuary to some degree. Well, I shouldn't say always, in most cases. So even if it's just browse, a deer will eat leaves off of a maple tree. It'll eat pods off of a locust tree. It'll eat leaves off most trees. It'll eat branches off of trees and leaves off trees. There's always going to be food in a sanctuary to some degree, unless you've got like a switchgrass field. I don't think deer are out there eating switchgrass. But in most cases, there's going to be some to some degree. So the oaks, the reason I would want oaks in there, I would use species that hold their leaves in the winter for the cover. Pin oaks, shingle oaks, things like that. That, I think, that was my whole intention. I think I just didn't do a very good job explaining it, like I often don't. But oaks that hold their leaves in the winter are every bit as good as conifer trees, and better, in my opinion. Conifer trees, once they get so big, the bottom branches start to die and they shade the ground and nothing else grows under them. And with oaks, there's typically always some understory under those oaks. And if they're holding their leaves, again, a great winter cover. So it was more for cover than the mast. Although you're right, they do produce mast, but the deer already have browse and other things to eat in there. So I'm not too concerned about that. It was a much better quality cover that you would get with oaks instead of ash.
I think when you were making the big comment and position about not mixing your food in your sanctuary was in response to people planting food plots inside of their switch or putting forbs in there to where a deer can just stand up and eat. I don't think it was necessarily, at least I don't remember, where we were pointed in a correction about your hardwood sanctuary. I think it was all switchgrass related.
Yeah, so I always suggest that you don't mix food in your switchgrass planting. Make those deer get up and walk out there to the edge. I see so many habitat recommendations online that I do not agree with, that I ought to start taking notes just so we could talk about them. But I think, there was a video that was released by Jake Hofer in the last week or so. He interviewed Phil Lincoln. And Phil Lincoln is a friend of mine. He's the guy that I went to Alaska and shot my moose with. He lived in Anchorage at the time, got a farm in Indiana, and I actually traded him a consultation on his Indiana farm for that moose hunt. Well, in this video, Phil had hired several other whitetail consultants, and he was just kind of sharing his experience with each one. But he said he did a little bit of everyone's plan except mine. And I think I was the first guy to visit his property. And the reason he did not follow my plan was because I took a big section of his property, the majority of his property, and I made it a sanctuary. and I had one major food source, and I wanted to dictate how the deer came out of that one major food source, or out of that big sanctuary to that one major food source. And Phil says on the video that he discussed it with his wife, and his wife said, there's no way we bought 70 acres to never go into it. So he kind of put my plan aside, although he admitted that if he wanted to kill giant bucks, my plan was probably the best plan to do that. But Phil also was talking about, he's really into habitat and habitat work, and I would love to see his farm today after, I haven't been there. It was 2012 when I went on the moose hunt, so we're pushing 13, 14 years since I consulted on his farm. And I get that. Some people have different goals and ideas for their farm, and killing the biggest buck in the whole neighborhood may not be high on their priority list. If it is, I think our team is the one to call for your consulting. If you like habitat work and you want to be doing habitat work all the time, there's guys out there with plans that'll keep you busy 365 days a year for the next 20 years doing some kind of habitat project. That's just not the approach we take. And I don't know where I was going with all this, but I think, everybody's got to look at what their goals are. And if you like doing habitat work, you're going to look at things totally different than we do. But I like to keep the food and the bedding separated as much as possible. But you got to remember, a white-tailed deer, there's like hundreds of plant species that a white-tailed deer will readily eat. Ragweed, water hemp. We have a problem with water hemp in our soybeans. I was spraying some water hemp this afternoon around my apple trees. The water hemp plants that I was spraying every single one of them had been browsed by the deer. That they'd browsed off that tender growth at the end of those plants. There are hundreds and hundreds of plant species that a deer will eat. So trying to keep a wooded sanctuary totally free of food is impossible. It can't be done.
Okay. All right, let's put the second question up.
This one comes from Randall Barr from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. It says, Don and Terry, I'm an avid listener of the podcast and appreciate all you do to educate hunters and to provide positive examples of how each of you lives your life and profess your faith to others. I'm also a big fan of real-world products, and I had West Delks do a consult on my property. I implemented a 6-acre planting of real-world switchgrass along with 13 acres of a pollinator planting with switchgrass. It was a CRP requirement as part of Wes's recommendations. My question comes from a podcast from Jake Hofer where he had Jack Houston on talking about his experience in doing thermal surveys of 200,000 acres. My understanding is that Jack surveyed Don's farm. During the podcast, Jack stated that he seldom finds deer in switchgrass, but I know Don said deer use his to bed. I'm sure many people have this same question. Given that you know Jack, can you clarify why he finds deer during his thermal surveys in switchgrass? I think he meant why he does not, but Randall, that's a great question. I can tell you this, every time Jack has been to my farm, there has been deer bedded in the switchgrass every single time, and I'm sure he would confirm that. I think a lot of times it's got to do with how that switchgrass is laid out. And it goes back to some of this stuff I see on the internet that I totally disagree with. I think a lot of switchgrass plantings are planted along field edges where they'll come out 100 feet or so and plant switchgrass next to the woods, and then it transitions into food. They talk about feathered edges and all this. Well, that's not conducive to a good bedding area for a mature buck. And you've also heard me say many times, the bigger the patch of switchgrass, the better that deer will relate to it and bed in it. And the reason for that's really simple. So a deer is bedded in a patch of switchgrass, he's typically not ever going to encounter danger within that switchgrass, a human danger anyway. Any danger he encounters is going to be on the edge. Once he steps out of that switchgrass, that's when he's in danger. So if a buck's bedded even right in the middle of a small patch of switchgrass, he's not very far from the edge. Deer do not like smaller patches of switchgrass to bed in my experience. The bigger, the better. I've seen, while we're talking about switchgrass, I've seen a post this week where guys planted this new and improved super duper variety of switchgrass. It's got a Facebook following, and they're having all kinds of problems with lodging this year. Well, lodging is basically the plant falling over. You can see it in soybeans sometimes. The soybean plants get too tall and the plant falls over before it dries. And we have never, ever seen lodging in real-world switchgrass. And I wonder if that might be some of the issue. It's the varieties of switchgrass. I know when we was doing the master class here on my home farm, we would actually invite people to walk out in the switchgrass in that one location by the smoky blind. We'd stand there for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, letting them climb up in the smoky blind, letting them walk out in that switchgrass right there. I wanted them to walk out there to see all the trails and beds that were in it. I mean, it's just full of them. And right next to it is a wooded sanctuary with really thick cover. They could have bedded in that sanctuary as well, and they do. But I think maybe some of it has to do with the switchgrass itself. But I promise you, they bed my switchgrass on my place on a daily basis.
When we were out at the Iowa Deer Classic this year, I went and did a land consulting visit for some listeners of the podcast about an hour north of where the show was one morning. And they had told me in the we do pre-interviews and phone conversations with all the clients. And I was looking at the aerial, and they told me that they had a big field of switch, but the deer weren't using it. And they just couldn't figure it out. Why are these deer not using it? It's river bottom. I mean, it's like good. I mean, it'd be a honey hole. Why aren't they in there? When I got there, the switchgrass was literally knee high. I mean, so I can't answer Jack's question of his 200,000 acres of switchgrass, and no, but here's some possible things. It could have been really short, thin switchgrass that they didn't bed in. But if you want, reach out to Jack on Midwest Drone Services and ask him. The switchgrass on your place is so thick and so tall. There's deer poured into it. There's deer in the woods too, but there's always deer. And you can actually see, are you okay with me putting the picture of the trails through the big patch picture up right now? Yeah. So we'll put that picture up here so you all can see how the deer are using the switch on Don's property. So, I think that there's another kind of like debate out there that switch is much better in big open ag areas where there's not as much cover versus when there's a lot of natural cover, woods. And there might be something to that too, just because it's the only spot that they gravitate to. But man, I've seen time after time switchgrass where there's a lot of deer poured into it.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. I think the variety of switchgrass, the time of the year, I think can affect that some too. I definitely have a lot more during the fall and winter months bedding in mine than I seem to in the spring and summer. Although they are there in the spring and summer, I think that's where the does have a lot of the fawns. And I think those bobcats we was talking about earlier, I think they just crawl around through that grass, and when they do that day after day after day all day long, eventually they're going to come across pheasants and that are trying to hide from, especially at night. That pheasant's not going to fly away. He's going to lay tight, and that cat's just going to get on him, the fawns. So there's a lot of factors that come into play there.
Well, thanks for the question, Randall. Don, Randall is a machine tool guy, so I know Randall from the machine tool industry. So appreciate your question and your support of the podcast, Randall. Hope all is well. He has a farm in Ohio. I don't know if he wanted that known or not, but hope you're not getting hit with EHD up there, buddy. All right, next question.
This one comes from Michael Gruber from Mosinee, Wisconsin. It says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Just had a question about food plot planting timing in your new plot system. I'm in a similar heavy ag area, and the deer don't seem to eat the brassica-type plants as much if you have corn and Gentoo beans around. However, the oats, peas type mix and harvest salad they really go after. So I also wanted to try something similar to what you did. How do you time the drone overseeding in your corn and beans? You've talked about for greens in your new plot system. I'm in central Wisconsin, so I'll be a few weeks ahead of you, like early to mid-September." So Michael, I already contacted my drone guy, and I've told him I don't want to plant mine before the 1st of September. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch the weather after the 1st of September, get a rain in the forecast, and we're going to try to get right ahead of that rain. Again, like I talked about earlier, I'd rather be a week late than a week early. A lot of, especially with these, it's like a double crop, but it's also a cover crop, which will come back next spring. It's It's not a major food source on my farm. It's a food source. I would call it a secondary food source. So as far as the timing in Wisconsin where you're at, you're probably going to want to get on it right away. We're getting here to the last week of August, so it's time for you to do it. I'm trying to think, was there something I missed in that question, Terry, or did I cover
No,
it?
I think you hit it all.
He said something about brassicas they don't hit.
That he doesn't think that they hit brassicas quite as hard.
And I would agree to that, but brassicas are very good for your soil. Those bulb plants like turnips and radish and such got a deep taproot that will bring nutrients up to the surface of the soil and into that bulb. When then the plant dies, that bulb deteriorates, and those nutrients that were down deep are now up there at the surface where your next crop can use them. I would encourage you to go ahead and add some brassicas, even if the deer don't seem to hit them as hard as they do the cereal grains and the peas.
All right. My computer locked up for a second. Hang on. Here we go.
The next one comes from Dennis Isaacs from Columbus, Indiana. It says, hello, Don and Terry. My Indiana property sees its fair share of fork-horned one-year-olds, with probably half or more being 6 points or less, but I never see 2-year-olds with less than 8 points. My main-framed 8s are heavy and start throwing splits and large kickers at 4. If you were me, would you cull a forked or 8-point 2-year-old or older in late season, since we're a one-buck state? Thanks for taking my question and for your dedication to the outdoors. Keep up the good fight. God's blessings to both you and your families. Well, Dennis, I don't advocate culling yearlings and 2-year-olds. They got to be really, really bad 2-year-olds. Almost never a yearling. I say almost because one time I did shoot a yearling, and that yearling buck had little spikes that literally were like 1-inch long spikes. And that buck, I seen him a couple different times during the hunting season, and he was with some other yearling bucks feeding in a plot one time, and his body was every bit as big and probably 20 pounds bigger, maybe 30 pounds bigger than any of the other yearlings in the plot, and yet he only had 1-inch spikes. The body size led me to think that deer was not, his rack wasn't indicative of being born late. It was just some type of genetic thing, and I shot that deer the last week of season. I still had a tag left, and so I shot him, posted on the internet a picture and why I did it, and I got roasted pretty good. And that was the same year that I passed up Smokey when he scored 186, and I posted a picture of Smokey, and I said I passed up this 186 and I shot this 1-inch spike, and boy did I get hammered. People thought I was nuts. But almost never ever do I ever advocate culling a 1.5-year-old yearling buck. A 2.5, almost never. Now I did post two pictures this week of 2 bucks. Their pictures were taken just a couple of minutes apart, and they've been in the same bachelor group all summer. One is a fantastic looking 3-year-old buck, and then there's another one that I believe is a 2-year-old that is absolutely a terrible looking deer. No brow tines. I think he's got 2 points on one side and 3 on the other, but no brows. Just a buck with no future. And I showed that as an example of the better 3-year-old is the buck that you want to live, and the other one, day and night different, is the one that needs shot. And the reason I posted it is because 99% of the time across the country, if those 2 bucks step out, that bigger 3-year-old is getting hammered every single time. And he's not the one that should be getting hammered. So that's a long-winded way of saying I almost never, ever advocate shooting a 2-year-old. When at 3 years old is when I start looking at which ones to cull. Now, which ones, you're throwing some examples out there of 8-pointers with stickers and this and that. My advice for you is if you've got, let's just say you got 4 3-year-olds on your farm, I would say shoot the worst 2. Let the best 2 live. Shoot the worst 2 at 3 years old, and then see what the best 2 do. And what'll happen if you don't? I learned this the hard way over many years. If you don't, Mother Nature's going to take care of the problem, and you're only going to be left with 2 of them anyway. No matter what happens, if you do nothing, you're going to be left with 2. But by shooting the worst 2, you have some influence on which 2 stay. So it's not an exact science. You're just playing the odds, and you're trying to help Mother Nature along when you can.
Okay. Last question.
This one comes from Drew Harmon from Floyd, Virginia. It says, Dear Dawn, I hear you talk about how important it is to have a sanctuary on your property and that it's crucial to stay out of there when it greens up except when retrieving a deer. My question is, should you treat your food plots like your sanctuary as well, except getting in there and planting your food plots? I heard a so-called habitat consultant preach on this, aka the dough factory guy, about how important it was not to spook deer out of your plots. He acted like it was more important than your sanctuary because the deer are there because of your plots, and if they get spooked a few times, you'll lose your deer to neighbors, especially if they have a food plot that's unpressured. I haven't heard you discuss this much, and I'm curious about your thoughts. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I think it is a valid point. I don't think it's ever a good idea to spook deer when accessing or hunting, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for everything you do for guys like me, helping me shave off the learning curve year after year. God bless, and I would like to hear an update on how your daughter is doing. Thanks. Well, Drew, my daughter's doing good. She's taking some cancer medicine, hopefully to prevent it from coming back. That's not the greatest on her. Some side effects that aren't too pleasant, but she's doing good and building a new house right down the road from me. So I'm looking forward to having them, move right down the road where I can see her and the grandkids and my son-in-law on a more regular basis. As far as your question about spooking deer off of food plots, now I think you don't want to spook deer anywhere on your property, food plots or sanctuary. And to minimize the possibility of that, I do my food plot work in the middle of the day when the deer are less likely to be around those plots. I don't go out there and in the evening and work the last 2 hours of daylight in my plots. I do it all in the middle of the day, even when I go check them or whatever. In the evening time, it doesn't matter what time of the year it is, even now in the summer. In the evening time, I'm staying out. And I think that I've said many times human intrusion is the killer of a lot of good properties, and it is. But I think I probably, again, it's my fault that I don't explain in enough detail. I just assume people know what I'm talking about. It's really your sanctuary, your bedding area, where it's the most critical. I've heard Lee Lakowski talk about he puts some human pressure on his farm so the deer are used to it. And, when he comes in to hunt, if they smell where he walked in or whatever, they don't get as worked up as if they never smell anybody. It makes perfect sense. And essentially, I do the very same thing. It's just where that human pressure is at. I promise you, Lee is not walking through his bedding cover spooking deer any time of the year, outside of maybe a shed antler hunt. It's where on the property that human intrusion's at, and also what time of the day. So around your food plots, I'm out checking my food plots this time of the year, probably at least once a week, but I'm doing it usually on a side-by-side or a four-wheeler. I want to be on a piece of equipment. I don't want to be walking around. A person on foot spooks deer way more than a person on a piece of equipment. And then I want to do it in the middle of the day, and that is probably the way to put the least amount of pressure there around your plots that I know of.
Okay. Good question. Thanks, Drew. Well, Don, you're going to make your way up to the Farm Progress Show this week. We hope everybody comes up. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to be there. Do you have any closing thoughts or comments or anything else that you want to tell people about before we sign off here?
Well, I just hope everybody that comes to the Farm Progress Show, and podcast listener anyway, stops by to introduce themselves. I just love meeting our listeners anywhere I'm at. So there's 3 days with a huge crowd going to be there. I know there's got to be some podcast listeners that are going to be at that show. So look forward to meeting you. And my last words of advice, Terry, is boycott Cracker Barrel. No more of that nonsense.
All right, folks, stay tuned after the closing for Sunday Night Prayer Time with Tate Hale, and make sure you're subscribed to Chasing Giants TV for all the other content that we got going there. That's it for this week, guys. We'll see you next.
God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by AIO Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey guys, what's up? Before I get started with the verse I kind of wanted to share with you today, I just wanted to take a quick sec and introduce myself. This is the first time I've shared on this group, which I'm honored to do so. But my name is Tate Hale from Southeast Ohio, outside a little town called Albany. Same area as I'm sure many of you know Eric Perry and Rich Hickson. Both of those guys, great guys who I am blessed to call friends. So, with that being said, before I share the verse, for those that don't know me, I was born with a very rare degenerative birth defect that caused a lot of pain growing up, and in the early 20s really took off with the degeneration side of things and the pain 24/7, 7 days a week. So in 2015, I amputated my right foot like a stubborn country guy. Was going to get everything I could out of the left foot before going and amputating it. And long story short, ended up messing up my knee, total knee replacement, knee revision surgery on a knee replacement. And right now, it's really not in a good place. Actually hurts way worse than before they actually replaced it. So kind of in that spot, do we stay here, try to live through this, or possibly consider just amputating above the knee and being free of pain? So the verse I wanted to share was a verse that is really kind of my go-to in dealing with this situation. It comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. This is the King James Version. But Paul is writing here, and Paul says, "At least I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelations. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Paul finishes with, "Therefore most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So kind of the 3 key points I take from this is, number 1, obviously, Paul is saying there's a thorn in my flesh, and I have pleaded out to God to remove it from me. So Paul is obviously dealing with some very, sickness, disease, pain here that is bad enough that he just says, "God, please take this from me." And God tells him, says, "My grace is sufficient for you." Now, I've heard grace just broken down like this: God's redemption at Christ's expense. And I think kind of what he's saying there is, Paul, everything that my grace, what I give to you, my Son, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, everything that he came to earth and fulfilled and did and conquered death and sin for you, that is sufficient for anything you're going to go through. And God also says, "For in your weakness, my power is perfect in your weakness." So that is the time when we're going through things like we don't know how we're going to get through it. Honestly, guys, if I do decide to do amputating, and like I said, above the knee, I have no idea how I'll get through that. And I won't, not on my own, because that'll be the perfect time for me to show the world how God's power shows up in our weakest moments, in our most scared times. And then the ego doesn't get the credit, but the supreme creator of the universe, he gets the credit. In our weakest times, he can show up and kind of steer the ship for us. So there are days where I deal with extreme pain, and sometimes I've been honest in my walk that even the mental side of this, feeling extreme pain for 5-7 days a week, that it's always there. It truly is that thorn in the flesh. It's a lot to deal with mentally because it's just so taxing. And there's 2 key things or reminders I tell myself in relation to this verse that has carried me so far. There is, suffering has a purpose. Pain has a purpose. There is either meaningless pain or meaningful sacrifice. And when we choose a meaningful sacrifice, a way of thinking to deal with this, we can still go out in the world and walk with joy, treat others with love and compassion, have a servant attitude, a servant mindset, and be the best representation of the teachings in this book that we can be. In the world, they may see all these hardships and everything and wonder, how do you keep that peace? And that is our chance to teach them about the peace that passes all understanding and share and hopefully grow the kingdom. The next thing that I reminded myself of this situation, because I have asked God to remove this from my flesh. God doesn't always remove the pain, but he always gives us grace. And once again, I'll say it, God's redemption at Christ's expense. Having Jesus and God be the main strength pillar of this is the only way I've made it through still fighting and ultimately haven't dishonored God in the greatest way possible, and that'd be quitting on what I think he has called me to do, and that is the best way I can honor him. So guys, I hope this encouraged you in some way. Like I said, this verse, you guys can read it again, break it down, apply it to your life, and I just hope it served you in some positive way this week. And real quick, I'll say a prayer and I'll let you guys get out of here. Lord, I just want to thank you for letting me share today, and honestly, hopefully that you spoke through me, and in some way this helps just one man on this call tonight. And I just wish everyone goes ahead this week, they hear your voice, they act upon your voice, and the world knows that it's a better place because they are living and ultimately in some way growing your kingdom. In your honorable and precious name we pray, amen. Have a great week, guys. Thanks a lot.